there, Grave Hamlin here from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Welcome, thanks for joining me. In today's video, I want to talk about bends and bending. They are, without a doubt, the thing that makes guitar playing cooler than anything else. So, there are very few instruments that can bend like we can. Almost any instrument, at least any instrument that I know of, can play a pentatonic scale and play blues notes, but very, very, very few of them can bend to the degree and with the accuracy and flavor, for lack of a better word, of what a guitar can do. So I really want to talk about the technique, really nailing your bends, some things to listen for, some things to maybe watch out for, all that kind of stuff. All right, so let's jump in with something rather basic. Now, I'm going to take the majority of my examples today from what would commonly be called box 1 of the A minor pentatonic scale. My guess is that you're quite comfortable playing that, so I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it. The first and simplest bend, and probably one of the most comfortable bends for most people, is the traditional, what we call a full step bend or a full bend. So here at the third string on the 7th fret, I want to bend that note up. And I'm using my third finger. So notice that I want to bend it up to make it sound like the note one whole step higher. From that note, one whole step is the 9th fret. So the trick here is to get used to exactly how much force is required to get to one full step. By the way, instead of the 9th fret on the 3rd string, one full step could be played with the 5th fret, on the 2nd string. So, if you want to compare the two, now when I do this bend, there's a few things that I want to point out. I have at least 2 fingers on it, maybe 3, okay? The reason is, one finger is going to keep the string against the fretboard. I have to keep the string against the fretboard or it's going to die. However, the finger that is keeping it against the fretboard likely isn't strong enough to also push it an entire step up. It's close, okay? So that second finger is going to do most of the pushing. And so notice that if I can get it up there and hold it, then I can also strike that note a whole step above it. And those two sound exactly the same. Now you might say to yourself, but Griff, my ear's not so good. How do I know if it's exactly the same? There's something you can listen for very closely. And these are something called beat cycles. If I play 2 notes, and they're not quite the same, you hear how they kind of go wah, 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 and it makes this kind of obnoxious flutter, and then you hear it go away. If I come down a little off, hear that flutter get faster? I know that's not a pretty sound. It gets faster and faster as it gets worse and worse. As I get closer, there they lock in. If I go too far, you can hear that flutter start to get faster again. Okay, that's a really annoying sound. And I realize that's an annoying sound, my apologies. But you really, sometimes that's what you have to do to be able to listen and hear that. Okay, now, if your fingertips start to get sore doing that, that's normal. It's okay. If you've not done a lot of bending, that's something that could very much get to you and your fingertips very, very quickly. The key is to do it steadily, day after day, okay? The worst thing you can do is, let's say you practice your bends for 5 or 6 minutes one day, and then the next day you're like, oh, my fingers are really sore, I better not practice them today. Let's not do that. Let's do it for 2 or 3 minutes today, 2 or 3 minutes tomorrow, 2 or 3 minutes the next day. Be consistent day after day. Your calluses will build much faster, they'll be much more consistent, and you'll get to the point where you can play and play and play and play. There was, for many years of my life, I gigged 5, sometimes 6 nights a week, playing usually 4 hours per night. After the first couple of weeks, like the first week of doing that, by about the 3rd night, man, my fingers were getting sore. By the 5th night of that week, that soreness was gone and pretty much never came back. So it does go away, and that's it. Like once your calluses get built up, it really never comes back. Okay, so what you want to be able to do, and what I want you to practice on is, like I said, take that note, bend it up to where you think it's supposed to be, and then hit the other note. See if they sound the same. I think I pretty much got it. Now, be very careful that you don't push that. You don't want to push that first finger. Can't do that. Or you could even hit the high E string. Because that's what that note ought to be. It ought to be an E. Why do we want to be able to do that? Well, first of all, when I do a bend in a lick, right, something like that, the first part of that says bend at a full step. I want to bend at a full step. I don't want to go, that sounds kind of silly, or if I barely get it moved, doesn't really do it justice. Okay, now I can do the same thing with a note on the 2nd string, and as it turns out, in that particular scale, that note happens to be on the 8th fret of the 2nd string, and the note above it is the note at the 5th fret of the 1st string. Now, here's what's really important. A bend is not something random, okay? We don't just randomly choose, we don't just play a note and go, oh, I'm gonna bend this one, okay? When you do that, you often get things like this, which bending the root is a really, really bad idea. And the reason is because the note that you bend, you are taking it from one pitch to another pitch. Okay, well, the next pitch in that scale is 3 frets away. Are you really going to bend it up that far? That's really far, particularly on the 1st string like that, low on the fretboard where there's more tension on the strings. I might do it here. On the 2nd string at the 10th fret, I can get a 1.5 step bend. But that's going to be a lot more of a challenge. This note here that I started with, I only have to go a whole step. This note here, I only have to go a whole step. Now notice that when I bend, and my pinky is the finger keeping it against the fretboard, my 3rd finger and my middle finger have to come along to get that string up. I really can't do it with only 2. I mean, I can, but it's uncomfortable. So I either am using 3 fingers or I'm switching over and using these 2. My pinky's just never really going to be strong enough for this. Now, if you're having trouble getting right up to the pitch and staying there, okay, it's one thing to get up there and stay there. It's a whole nother thing to and slowly fall off. But if you can play the note and you can stay there, right? And you can keep hitting that reference pitch, and like I can hold this for quite a while. When you get to that point, then you'll probably be able to start adding a little vibrato if you wish. You don't have to. And vibrato is just, going up and down a little bit. It's similar to any other vibrato, where you kind of, but basically it's I loosen my grip and push it back and loosen it and push it back. And I'm pushing against the thumb. Now, that's kind of one of those way off in the distance things. If you're new to bending and you're just getting the hang of it, the vibrato thing is going to be way down the road. And I tell students all the time, don't worry about vibrato. worry about getting the notes clean and comfortable. If you can play everything right to pitch, clean, it's comfortable, it's no problem, and you decide that you want to hear vibrato, you'll probably just add it. I never learned how to play vibrato growing up. I just got to a point where I could play what I wanted to play, and then I just decided it would sound cool with some vibrato, and I messed around with it for a few minutes and started playing stuff with vibrato. My guess is it's going to go pretty much the same for you. It's not generally the thing that I have to spend a lot of time teaching. I have to spend a lot of time teaching people to get to the point where the vibrato should be added. Okay, so don't worry about the vibrato. That's the sugar on top. It's the cherry on top. Okay, it's the sprinkles. It's whatever you want to call it. It's way at the end, and it's easy at that point. Little dash, you're done. It's really not a thing the way people often make it. I know it sounds cool. It sounds amazing. We hear somebody like B.B. King or Freddie King or Eric Clapton, and we hear that magnificent singing vibrato. But I can assure you that came much later. They had to get all those patterns, all those notes, all those shapes, all those licks down first, then the vibrato. So if we're here talking about bending right now, vibrato's a ways off, so don't worry about it. Okay, so we have so far, we have a third string, I'll say third finger bend, or a fourth finger full. These are both full step bends. Now I could go a half step. You'll often see me do like with, okay, so that's a full step bend. I'm here playing what I call the house pattern. Some people call it the B.B. King box. And that's a full step bend. And by the way, there is such thing as a pre-bend, where you first bend it. And so that's one of the reasons why I have to be able to just know. I have to know how far to go, as opposed to a half step. Those should all sound the same. I realize I'm not nailing it. I get pretty close. But you really want to be able to hear the difference between your half step bend and your whole step bend. I can even do half step, whole step, step and a half. That's a little more of a challenge. But it's something worth practicing on. Anyway, that's one of those things you can kind of get wrapped up with. Like I said, it's a good thing to practice on. I could do it with my pinky. Okay? All of these things are things you could potentially practice on. Now, theoretically, you might sometimes bend with only your first finger. It's unusual, but it does happen. You get like the... kind of the Stevie Ray climb thing. But even on that one, I'll do a half step with my first finger. Right? I have 10 gauge strings. A full step bend with my first finger alone is a lot of work, and it does get tender on the fingers. So I tend to limit my first finger bends to a half step, and then I'll bring my middle finger in. Or I might even move on to my third. That's unnecessary. But you get the idea. So there's lots of different ways that we can bend. But the key is to get to that pitch and to make sure that it is a pitch within the scale. Okay, now if I was doing like a major scale, right? Neil Schon does this all the time. Okay, so if I'm playing a C major scale, right? So I play the C, I take the B, bend it up a half step to the C and back, go down to the A. When I get to the E, I bend it up to the F, D, C, D, goes up a whole step to the E. Right? Stuff like that. That's it. That's another good way that you can use these types of things. Another great idea. Remember we showed, like for practicing, right, to hold both of those notes. In a pentatonic scale, this is a common move as well. Right? So I will bend that note up, but instead of hitting that note at the 5th fret of the 2nd string, I hit the note at the 8th fret with my pinky. And if you can bar it, you can really dig in. It can even sound a little country. You can also get a little out of tune, as I have done. If you bend a lot. So anyway, keep that in mind. All of those are different options. If I bend up there, using that house pattern, so sometimes if you're trying to use your pinky like that, let's say you don't use your pinky, you might have to bend with the middle finger and grab that other note with your 3rd finger. Any of those options will work. But the main thing, again, is you have to get that bend just to the right note, particularly when you add in another note with it. You can get some just wicked beat cycles going on and make your fillings rattle if it's just a little bit off. You really got to get precise. I read an interview once with, I think it was Eric Clapton, where somebody asked him, like, what do you practice on? And he said, pretty much bending is about it. That's really all he still practiced on. This was 10 or 15 years ago, maybe more than that now. But it's an important thing to think about. Bending and getting to the right pitch. If I don't play a guitar for a few days and I come back, I know that my bends getting exactly to the right pitch quickly and effortlessly is one of the first things that goes away. So make sure that you're always taking a little bit of time each day to just do a couple of those whole step bends. Make sure you're right honed in on the pitch. If you can do that, everything's going to work out great, and all those other licks will start to fall into place. Okay? So, as always, I am Griff Hamlin from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Thanks for joining me today. If you have friends that that play guitar and you think would dig this video, I hope you'll share it with them, and I will see you again real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.